At the beginning of love, effort feels natural. No one needs to remind you to reply. No one needs to tell you to listen. No one needs to ask you to care. Attention flows easily. You notice small details. You respond quickly. You make time even when time is limited. And it does not feel like effort at all. It feels like desire. It feels like connection. It feels like something you want to do, not something you have to do. But as time passes, something subtle begins changing. Messages take longer. Conversations become shorter. Moments of attention become less frequent. And slowly, almost quietly, effort begins fading. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, until one day the relationship still exists, but the effort that once sustained it is no longer there. And this creates one of the most painful questions in relationships. Why do people stop putting effort into something they once cared about so deeply? Because effort is not only about time or actions. Effort is a reflection of psychological engagement. It shows how much emotional energy the mind is investing into the connection. And when effort fades, it reveals something deeper. Not always the absence of love, but the transformation of how the mind experiences the relationship. Understanding this requires looking beyond behavior and into the hidden psychological processes that shape emotional investment. Because people rarely wake up one day and decide to stop trying. Effort fades through patterns, through shifts in perception, through changes in emotional reward. And once those shifts begin, the relationship slowly moves from active connection into passive existence. At the beginning of love, effort feels effortless, because the brain associates the relationship with emotional reward. Every interaction feels meaningful. A message brings excitement. A conversation creates connection. Time spent together feels valuable. These experiences activate the brain's reward system. Dopamine creates anticipation. Oxytocin creates emotional bonding. The relationship becomes psychologically stimulating. And when something feels rewarding, the mind naturally wants to invest more effort into it. But over time, this dynamic begins changing. Not because the relationship suddenly becomes meaningless, but because the brain adapts. What once felt new becomes familiar. What once felt exciting becomes expected. And when experiences become expected, their emotional impact decreases. This is one of the most important psychological truths about human behavior. The brain responds strongly to novelty, but it adapts to repetition. As the relationship becomes predictable, the reward system becomes less active. The same actions no longer produce the same emotional response. Messages feel normal instead of exciting. Conversations feel routine instead of engaging. Moments together feel familiar instead of stimulating. And when the brain experiences less emotional reward, something subtle begins happening. Motivation decreases, because motivation is closely tied to reward. When something feels less rewarding, the mind naturally invests less energy into it. This is not a conscious decision. It is a psychological response. And this is often the first stage where effort begins fading. Not because the person stops caring completely, but because the relationship no longer stimulates the same level of emotional engagement. Another hidden reason effort fades is the shift from desire to obligation. At the beginning of relationships, actions feel voluntary. You want to call, you want to meet, you want to spend time together. But over time, those same actions can begin feeling expected, required, routine. And once something begins feeling like an obligation, the emotional experience changes. Because the mind does not respond to obligation the same way it responds to desire. Desire creates energy. Obligation drains it. When interactions feel like something you have to do instead of something you want to do, the brain begins resisting them, even if the relationship itself still matters. This resistance is often subtle. A delayed response, a lack of enthusiasm, a feeling of mental fatigue during interaction. And over time, these small changes accumulate. Effort continues decreasing, not because the person consciously chooses to stop trying, but because the emotional experience of the relationship has shifted. Effort also fades when there is emotional imbalance in the relationship. When one person feels they are investing more than the other, a psychological reaction begins forming. The mind starts tracking effort, comparing, evaluating, and when the imbalance feels consistent, motivation begins decreasing, because the brain seeks fairness. It seeks balance. If effort is not reciprocated, the emotional reward of giving begins weakening. The person who once invested freely begins holding back, reducing effort, not as punishment, but as protection. And once this pattern begins, both partners may slowly reduce effort, each responding to the other's decreased investment, until the relationship enters a cycle of low emotional energy, where neither person is fully engaged, and the connection slowly weakens. Effort doesn't always disappear because love disappears. Sometimes, effort disappears because the mind becomes tired, not physically, emotionally, and emotional exhaustion is one of the most misunderstood forces in relationships because it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with arguments every day. It doesn't always create visible conflict. Instead, it slowly drains the energy required to stay emotionally present. At first, the person still tries. They respond, they listen, they show up, but internally something begins changing. Interactions that once felt light start feeling heavy. Conversations that once felt natural start requiring effort. And this is where a dangerous shift begins. Because when emotional energy decreases, the mind begins protecting itself. The human brain is designed to conserve energy, constantly evaluates, is this worth my emotional investment? At the beginning of love, the answer is always yes. But over time, if interactions become emotionally demanding, the answer slowly starts changing. If conversations turn into repeated problems, if understanding feels one-sided, if emotional needs feel unmet, the brain begins reducing investment, not consciously, but automatically. This is where effort doesn't disappear suddenly. It gets reduced piece by piece. Shorter replies, less curiosity, less emotional availability, and eventually, Minimal engagement. One of the most dangerous patterns in relationships is not conflict. It is silence. Because when people argue, they are still emotionally engaged. But when someone starts withdrawing quietly, that's when effort begins dying. Silent withdrawal happens when a person feels, "I'm not being understood." Explaining doesn't change anything. It's easier to stay quiet than to try again. And once this mindset forms, something powerful happens. The person stops expressing, stops explaining, stops investing emotionally. They are still present physically, but mentally they begin stepping back. And this creates an illusion. From the outside, it looks like the relationship is stable. No major fights, no obvious problems. But internally, connection is weakening, and effort begins disappearing silently. Another deep psychological trigger for losing effort is perceived imbalance. When someone feels like, "I'm the only one trying," the mind starts questioning, "Why should I keep investing?" Not out of ego, but out of emotional fairness. Humans are wired to seek reciprocity. When effort is not matched, the brain reduces output. It protects itself from overinvestment. This is why in many relationships both people feel, "I'm doing more than them," and because of that perception, both start reducing effort, creating a downward spiral, where less effort, less connection, less connection, less motivation, less motivation, even less effort, until eventually the relationship continues, but without emotional depth. There's another layer most people never understand. Sometimes people don't stop putting effort because they don't care. They stop because they've already tried too much. Repeated attempts to fix things, repeated efforts to communicate, repeated attempts to reconnect. When these attempts don't create change, the brain reaches a point of emotional burnout. And burnout changes behavior in a very specific way. The person stops initiating, stops trying to fix things, stops putting extra effort, not because they don't feel, but because they feel it's useless. This is one of the most painful psychological states, because the person still cares internally, but externally they appear detached. And from the other side, it looks like they stopped trying, but the reality is deeper. They didn't stop trying suddenly. They stopped after trying too much without seeing change. Effort also fades when expectations remain unspoken. When someone silently expects a more attention, a more understanding, a more emotional presence, but never clearly expresses it, a gap forms between expectation and reality. And over time, that gap turns into disappointment. But because it's not communicated clearly, it doesn't get resolved. It just builds internally until the person starts feeling they should already understand. And when that expectation isn't met, effort begins decreasing, not as punishment, but as emotional reaction. At the beginning, presence feels intentional. You choose to be there. You want to engage. But over time, presence can turn into habit. And habit removes awareness. You're there, but not fully there. Conversations happen, but without depth. Moments are shared, but without attention. And when awareness disappears, effort disappears with it, because effort requires intention, and intention requires awareness. Without it, relationships shift into autopilot, and autopilot slowly kills emotional connection. And this is the truth most people never say. People don't stop putting effort in love. In one moment, they stop. In 100 small moments, moments where they felt unheard, moments where they felt unappreciated, moments where they felt emotionally tired, moments where trying didn't change anything. And each of those moments removes a little bit of effort until one day there's nothing left to give. There is a stage in relationships that looks calm from the outside, but is collapsing from the inside. No arguments, no drama, no obvious problems, and yet something feels missing. This is the stage where love does not end. It becomes passive. And passive love is one of the most dangerous states a relationship can enter, because it doesn't feel like loss at first. It feels like normal. At the beginning of love, everything is active. You actively listen, actively respond, actively care, actively try to understand. There is movement. There is emotional engagement. But over time, something subtle changes. The relationship shifts from "I want to connect" to "I am just here." And this shift is almost invisible, because both people are still present. They still talk. They still meet. They still maintain the structure of the relationship. But the emotional intensity behind those actions is gone. And this is where effort disappears completely, because effort only exists when there is intention. And intention fades when emotional urgency disappears. One of the biggest traps in relationships is the illusion of stability. When there are no conflicts, people assume everything is fine. But absence of conflict is not always presence of connection. Sometimes it is the absence of emotional investment, because when people stop caring enough to argue, they also stop caring enough to fix things. And this creates a quiet distance where both people coexist, but no longer deeply connect. This is where relationships become confusing, because physically nothing has changed. The person is still there. The relationship still exists. But emotionally, distance has formed. And emotional distance is not about space. It is about disconnection. You can sit next to someone and still feel far away. You can talk every day and still feel unheard. You can be in a relationship and still feel alone. This is the stage where effort has already faded, because effort requires emotional presence, and emotional presence has already weakened. Here is something most people don't realize. The brain constantly prioritizes what feels important. At the beginning, the relationship is a priority. You think about the person. You plan. You invest attention. But when emotional engagement decreases, the brain slowly shifts focus. Other things become more important. Work, distractions, personal space. And this shift is not always conscious. It happens gradually. The relationship moves from important to available, meaning you give attention when it's convenient, not when it's needed. And this is where effort disappears almost completely. Comfort feels safe, but too much comfort can destroy effort, because effort is driven by emotional movement. When everything becomes predictable, stable, unchanging, the brain stops pushing for connection. There is no urgency, no curiosity, no emotional tension. And without tension, there is no motivation to invest. This is why some relationships don't end. They just become flat. And in that flatness, effort quietly dies. One of the most dangerous psychological patterns is adaptation. Humans adapt to anything, even emotional distance. At first, lack of effort feels noticeable. You feel it, you question it, but over time, you get used to it. You adjust your expectations. You stop asking for more. You accept less. And when both people adapt to low effort, the relationship stabilizes, but at a lower emotional level, where nothing feels deeply wrong, but nothing feels deeply right either. Attraction and connection are sustained by curiosity, wanting to know more, wanting to understand, wanting to explore the other person's mind. But when effort fades, curiosity disappears. You stop asking meaningful questions. You stop noticing changes. You stop exploring each other. And once curiosity is gone, connection becomes surface level, because depth requires interest, and interest requires effort. This is the point where something irreversible can begin. Not always, but often. The person is still there, but emotionally, they are no longer attached the same way. They care, but not intensely. They stay, but not deeply. They respond, but without emotional energy. And this is the hardest stage to recognize, because nothing looks broken, but everything feels different. And here is the truth most people don't want to face. Effort doesn't disappear because love instantly disappears. Effort disappears because the emotional experience of the relationship has changed. The brain no longer feels the same reward. The heart no longer feels the same intensity. And the mind no longer sees the same value in investing energy. And once all three shift, effort naturally fades. Not dramatically, but quietly. There comes a moment in every relationship, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply decisive. A moment where the relationship silently asks, "Will you invest again? Or will you slowly let this fade?" And most people don't even realize when this moment arrives, because it doesn't come with warning. It comes disguised as normal days, normal conversations, normal distance. But internally, something is shifting. At this stage, effort has already reduced. Connection feels weaker. Emotional intensity has faded. And now the relationship stands at a psychological crossroad, not between love and hate, but between intentional effort and passive existence. Because here is the truth. Relationships don't survive on feelings alone. They survive on continued emotional investment. And when that investment stops, the relationship doesn't end immediately. It slowly dissolves. Some people notice this shift, not clearly, but deeply. They feel something is missing. They sense the distance. And instead of ignoring it, They choose to act, not because it feels easy, but because they understand something most people don't. Effort is not always natural. Sometimes, effort is a conscious decision. They begin asking again, listening again, showing up again, not perfectly, but intentionally. And this changes everything, because effort, when reintroduced consciously, can restart emotional connection. The brain begins receiving new signals, new attention, new engagement, and slowly, the relationship can move back from passive to active. But most people don't do this, not because they don't care, but because they wait. They wait to feel like it again. They wait for motivation to return. They wait for the relationship to fix itself. And while they wait, nothing changes, because motivation does not always come first. Action does. And when no one takes action, the relationship stays where it is, or worse, it slowly declines further. One of the biggest misconceptions people believe is this: if it's real love, effort should be natural. But that is only true in the beginning. In the early stage, effort feels effortless because emotions are strong. But as emotions stabilize, effort requires awareness. It requires intention. It requires choice. And people who don't understand this mistake natural emotional decline for loss of love, when in reality, it is a test of whether they can maintain connection consciously. Relationships don't collapse overnight. They fade in silence, through missed moments, through reduced attention, through emotional absence. And the most dangerous part is this: it feels normal while it's happening, until one day, the connection is gone. And both people look back thinking, when did this change? But the truth is, it didn't change in one moment. It changed in hundreds of small moments where effort was not given. And this is the reality most people avoid. You don't lose love, you lose the effort required to maintain it. Because love without effort becomes memory, not experience. And once a relationship becomes memory, even while it still exists, it is already fading. Effort is not just action. It is attention. It is awareness. It is emotional presence. And when these disappear, love slowly loses its structure, not its existence, but its expression. And without expression, love cannot survive. And this is the truth most people never say. People don't stop putting effort because love disappears. They stop because the connection stops feeding their mind, because the relationship stops feeling alive, because emotional energy slowly drains without being restored. And if you really understand this, you begin to see relationships differently. You stop asking, do they still love me? And you start asking, are we still investing in what we once built? Because in the end, love is not something that stays strong on its own. It is something that survives only when both people choose, again and again, to give it life. So before you assume love is fading, ask yourself one question: has the effort disappeared? Or have we just stopped giving it? And if you felt something in this, if this made you reflect, then you already understand more than most people ever will. Subscribe to Voxlore Audio, because here we don't just talk about relationships, we reveal the psychology behind what silently controls them.